Good evening and welcome to Inside Government for the fall 2016 semester here at Cuyahoga Community College and broadcast on Time Warner Communications, Verizon, Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, ARMA, as well as WIN 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm Guy Cosentino, your host. Last year, the City of Auburn undertook a review of its current parks and playgrounds using the services of SUNY Syracuse University's Environmental Sciences and Forestry School, staff and students. Over the last year, they have worked to put together a plan that they presented to the Auburn City Council last Thursday night. We are delighted to have both city staff and SUNY ESF representatives who put the plan together in to discuss it. They are in no particular order. Tiffany Beebe, who is the director, is a senior planner with the City of Auburn, as well as Natalie Spinola, who is an ESF grad student. Marin King is with ESF and the Architectural School. You all have two confusing titles. Architectural School, and of course, Director of Capital Projects, Christina Selvik, and you've been on before, so welcome, ladies all. Just as a matter of disclosure, I was asked, along with YMCA's Executive Director, Chris Nucerino, to serve as private citizens on this panel to have an outside perspective. There were other city staff involved, but I just want to make that as a disclosure. Welcome. So let's talk about some basics here about this. What was the task that was undertaken to put out, you have a better looking copy, so I'll do the bigger print one, to put this report together?
Well, the City Planning Department was able to secure funding to look at our parks in a systematic manner. And to do that, we reached out to SUNY ESF Landscape Architecture Program, and Barnes here to talk about that process and definitely the community process that we use to engage the public in order to produce this beautiful document that will hope inform us and guide us in future investment in our parks.
So why did the city do this? Why undertake a review of parks?
Sure. Back in, I'd say probably 2010, we kind of started doing park improvement projects, and we were able to use our community development block grant funds. So we were doing a number of projects, and we were trying to find funding for some of our other parks that weren't eligible for CDBG funding, and realized that we were in need of a parks master plan and kind of do a whole inventory of our parks and find some better recommendations that we could try to follow.
So before getting into what you were doing in the inventory, how many active and passive parks does the city have right now?
23.
So that is down from what it was, say, 20 years ago. Some of that has been land that's either been sold off or given to the school district or things of that nature. Am I correct?
Correct.
Do you differ now? Sitting in these meetings, I said passive and active,
Right.
and you both looked at, well, you didn't look at me oddly, but you did. So passive and active, I would consider a passive park something like Hoops Park, where there's no playground equipment,
Right.
where the reverse is you got colorful playground.
Clifford or Casey,
Okay.
those are our active, yeah.
And does the city differentiate between them?
We do, and we actually try to be sympathetic to those uses. We know that those in and around Hoops are very passionate about, I think, the passive use of the park, although we do the movie night and those type of activities
Yeah,
there.
the only climbing there is on those trees over by the stream. Okay.
That's right.
So you mentioned that you have put some resources in, whether it's capital improvements or personnel, but you've done, and I just listed three: Columbian Rope, which is down by Tops on the west end. You've done Osborne, which is by Wegmans, or up in that area. St. Francis over by the old school, not necessarily
We're
the
still
church.
working on that one.
And, and then you've also, so those are active, and then you've also done Michael Epic Park, I think it's called Michael Epic Park, on Garrow Street, which is a garden, correct? So where did the financing for those, and are there other ones planned?
For all the active ones that you listed.
So Columbian, St.
Francis, Osborne, as well as Benton Street. Was all community development block grant
Benton
funds.
is in that area along
Orchard Street neighborhood.
Street, and it's a beautiful park,
Yes.
pocket park there. I call it.
Yes.
Is it what it's called?
Pocket
Park there for the neighborhood. So where did the money for that come? CDBG?
Yep, CDBG. I will note that for Osborne, we did have some partner funding from ABC.
ABC being?
Auburn Beautification Commission.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Yep.
Because I know there's a number of ABCs right now, so I
Yes.
just want to make sure we have the
Yes.
right one. Okay.
Yes.
Are there plans for other playgrounds that you're working on?
Clifford, and I think we have one more. Are we working on one more?
St. Francis, we need to finish
Okay.
that up. We've only,
And is that most of your parks where you have playground equipment? I mean, you look at it; they're vibrant colors. I mean, I look at Columbia because I pass by that every day. You know, you have all this new equipment there. Are there other parks that still have to be done but may not be in the CDBG zone?
Definitely.
Yes.
And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, was focus on parks that may not be able to receive the benefit of those funds.
So just so people, they hear the words community development block grant money, that is based on demographics, unemployment,
Poverty levels,
poverty
yep.
level. So some of the city is included, some of the city is not.
Right. We're about 50%, right, included, and about 50% non-eligible. So it's a mixture in the West End and less so on the East End.
And so when you were putting the plan together, and I know we don't have a map of all of the parks because nobody would be able to see it, it's so microscopic. You included not only those 23, 24 city parks, you included other parks such as land that the Auburn School District has.
Yeah, what we did is that we looked at publicly available space or open space that actually had facilities that the public could use.
So for example, the nature trail here, Holland Stadium next door,
Right.
in Genesee Elementary School.
And much of that information came from community members during the workshops we did and the questionnaire that we put out, and asked people what parks and open space they used, where they did recreational activities. Most of it was in the parks, and that was what our focus was, but we also knew that we needed to consider what are these other facilities available.
And you also found out, I thought I heard this on Thursday night when you presented, there's one area of the city that's not served by any parks in the sense of the downtown
Right.
area. Other than Osborne Park, there's really nothing. I think you had mentioned Lower and Upper State Street.
It was the State Street area.
Any
yeah.
particular reason why?
In that case, it had to do with walking distance to different
Okay.
parks, and so what we did is that we actually mapped where all of the parks are located and where all of the other public facilities are located, and a common standard is about a quarter mile to a half-mile walk. And when we did that mapping, we could see there was a hole, and I
You
think
have ones that border Benton,
Yeah.
Casey Park, Osborne, but really that
yeah.
you have other parks there. You have Market Street, correct?
Well, this
But
was
that-
more north on State
more
Street.
north, okay.
Yeah, so it's outside of downtown, in an area that I think has a pretty dense population, and so the recommendation was to look for potential locations for a pocket park, a small park in that
And is that
area.
something you would see on the city's agenda in the future?
It is a recommendation in the plan, so
So how much did the report cost?
we were able to allocate $35,000 to the project total. Not all of that went into the report itself, but was through partnership with SUNY ESF and engaging the Center for
But it's
Community
taxpayer
Design and
dollars
Research.
that you-
It is. So
okay.
it's city dollars through our operating funds that we were able to do this.
And why did you pick SUNY ESF?
Well, I am a graduate of the program,
Okay.
so I'm very familiar with the tools that they use to engage the public, and what we had seen, particularly after we did Lincoln Park as well, that the community and the neighborhoods really wanted to give feedback.
So Lincoln, for those who don't know, and I'm sorry to
Yes.
step back, that's up by Standard Avenue in that area?
Yes, so
Okay.
over by the hospital.
North Fulton?
Yes.
Standard, okay.
Yep. And so we were able to secure city funds to do that park. We held a park meeting, and we had a lot of good feedback, at which point we said, when we start to move ahead with a Parks Master Plan project, we really want to have a strong public participatory process. And I really didn't know of any place that does it better than Maren and her staff there. So
let's
that was
talk
our
about that
reason.
process
Yeah.
that you all went through, and it was interesting. And I say I stopped when you mentioned the name of a park to describe it, because one of the things that you had at one of the meetings was please name parks.
Right.
Did anybody get any, other than Mike Talbot? Did anybody get all 23?
No.
No. Okay. So
You remember?
no. Okay. So you did a lot of surveys and you did public meetings. So could you walk us through a little bit about who you brought in and why?
So for the surveys, we did online surveys, and we had asked questions about the use of parks, what they like about the parks that they use, and then we did workshops where we brought people in to go over some of these underutilized parks and have comments from the community about what they like and what they don't like about
So a
these
very
parks.
community-driven
Yes.
report versus 8 people got in a room. And the 8 people did get into a room to flesh out things, but to
Right.
make more so recommendations on process, not on specific
Yeah.
language. Am I-
Very
Right.
community driven, similar to a comprehensive plan approach.
Okay.
So.
And we're going to get to that because there are some CDBG hearings at the end of the month. We want people to participate in that. How many public meetings did you end up having? I know there was one here.
Goodness.
You did one over at the corner of Fitch and South Street at one of the churches.
There were 3 initial workshops where we were looking for information about existing conditions and trying to understand community values in a way. And then we had a couple of open house meetings where community members actually reviewed existing conditions of specific parks and provided information on that. And then we also had a final workshop where community members reviewed design studies.
So
for the
let's
parks.
go, and that was at the Hilton Garden, if I
Yes.
remember correctly. So let's go back to when you had one of these 3 public meetings. I said one was here Saturday at the college, and I know you've done other places. What did you do during those sessions?
Well, we asked a series of questions, and those questions helped us as planners and designers understand the parks and actually Auburn from the perspective of the people who live here, because you guys are the experts in your own communities, and whereas we can come in and then and take that information, analyze it, document it, analyze it, and translate that into the vision and goals that we could then review with community members, and then also from that information we begin to understand the things that people really liked about the parks, the things that they really valued, and also the concerns that they had.
So before getting into those concerns and values, how many people attended on average, any idea?
Oh, I think overall we had 30 to 35 people at the workshops.
Okay.
And it would have been great to have more people, but from the perspective of the type of information we were able to gather, it was really useful, and those people then started to become engaged in the process.
So let's talk about concerns. So we have 2 charts here. We're going to deal with this one first.
Right.
I'll hold it up so that they can get it on camera. And this is Sherwood. This is down on the west end, closest to where Tabitha's, the backside of where Tabitha's and old Ricky's restaurant, Booley Construction.
Yep.
So what were some of the concerns on Sherwood?
Some of the concerns were about the playground equipment, kind of the condition that they are in now. People were saying they were a little run down or not age appropriate for a variety of age groups. Underutilized, and some vandalism, especially with the courts.
What kind of courts are down
They're
there?
basketball courts.
So is there in the report, and I know you've made several presentations to the city.
Right.
Do you want me to keep this up or
Yeah,
not?
because there other aspects about this park and some of the other parks are that they are not appealing to all age groups. And so many of the parks have playground structures or pieces of playground equipment, but the neighborhoods have many other people living in them who want to be able to use the parks. And in the case of Sherwood, several community members who lived around the parks were saying, oh, well, there's things that we would like to be able to do in the parks. So suggestions for something like a community garden, places for people to sit. And so as we went through meetings for all of these parks, we began to understand that people were thinking, well, they're for children, but can they be for other people in the neighborhood as well?
And so did you find that a lot of that in the sense of, have parks changed from what they were perceived 30 years ago? 30 years ago, there were parks employees, I mean, there were students who really did programming that the city got rid of that about 15 years ago or something.
1980s.
1980s. So, well, no, they still had playground workers in the 90s, but they totally eliminated the program
Yes. Right.
in a sense. Have parks changed in the way that they're perceived by the public?
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
That many of the comments that we got from, say, middle-aged to older adults were remembering the programs that took place.
So they want kids in orange shirts to be back to build.
Well, they
with tongue
remembered them,
depressors.
and
Okay.
so the memory of that and that use, and related to that was, again, the parks are for young people. The parks are for children. They're not for adults, and so.
But is that true?
No, well, it shouldn't be true. And certain parks, the bigger parks that have more facilities and activities, Hoops Park, Clifford Park, and Casey Park, really do have a variety of facilities that would be attractive to all ages. But the majority of the parks at this point really are focused on children's play structures.
So that was what the public talked to you about, was what they thought for children's places. Did they have concerns as well?
They had concerns in terms of the condition of the parks and the maintenance aspect of them.
So cleanliness.
Yeah, cleanliness, trash,
Was safety ever an issue?
safety from the perspective of is the equipment up to date? That type of safety. I mean, there were some.
Was that the real standout on equipment?
Yeah, but there were some issues related to vandalism as well. So not a lot of that. But I think in terms of maintenance, that there is a sense that they're maintained, but we also need to be paying attention to the age and the usefulness of the equipment.
So I'll ask this as the flip side of that. So they were all asked their opinions on what should be done, where they asked their question of whether they pay higher taxes to do it.
No, and no, we didn't ask that question.
Okay, I just asked that because everybody has a list,
Right.
but they just don't.
Yeah, and part of that.
Not that the
is-
city staff would ever find
No,
that out, that
no.
everybody wants something, but they just
Yeah.
don't want to pay for it.
Well, and part of that has to do with, I think, developing a vision. That when you start thinking about vision and what it is we want to be able to do in 10 years, or how do we want to be able to describe our parks in 10 years, that's really where you want to get to. And then you try and figure out, right, how do we do that? And what we discovered, I don't know if this is too early in your questioning, what we discovered was that people were willing to help with the parks. And that they said, well, there are things that we could do to help provide some of the, eyes in the park, do cleanup events, a number of things that community members
But can
would
can
volunteer
a
for.
city, and I don't mean this
Yeah.
about Auburn, but can a city depend on that in the long term?
Well, that's one of our recommendations. And one of the goals here is to try and figure out how is it that we develop sustainable resources in order to maintain these parks and to keep them the quality that the community wants to be proud of.
So I'm not going to show the graph, but you did have a graph in the report, which was high priority, high cost, low priority, low cost.
Right.
Can you tell us about some of the high priority items that are recommendations?
Yeah, I don't have the list in front of me.
Well,
but
okay, so for
but the
one-
high priority, the highest priority were some of the parks that had not received attention over the last 5-10 years. So,
Yeah.
so Tiffany named some parks through that had been restored or renovated over the last 5-6 years. There are a list of parks that have not received that type of attention, and Sherwood being one of them. And so from the perspective of recommendations, that is a high priority. It probably also is a high cost. And so that type of improvement would need to be planned over time.
Were there low-cost, high priorities?
I would say one of the low-cost, high priorities was to distribute this plan broadly throughout the community. So we were
So
recommending.
this is online?
This
How-
is
how can
So it's online.
Okay.
But one of the things that has been useful in other communities is to prepare like an 8-page summary that could be a hard copy that is distributed to community members or is available in different public places and would also be available online. Because this, if you read the executive summary of this, you're going to get a good overview of the plan. And then if you want more detail, you can read it online.
And it's on the city's website where?
It is on the city's website under the planning department's page.
Okay. So just a quick side trip a little bit away. Does SUNY ESF do these types of studies on a regular basis?
We, the Center for Community Design Research, which is based in the Department of Landscape Architecture at SUNY ESF, works on a regular basis with communities across upstate New York, central New York, and sometimes further, on projects that involve our students and community members. And do we typically do a Parks and Recreation master plans? We are working on parks projects, doing a master plan. We've worked with the city of Syracuse, but not for a total parks master plan. It's been like a group of 3 parks together. But we use a similar process in all of our work. So.
And so what role did students play in all this? Because when I went to meetings, while the 3 of you were there, you were outnumbered usually by 3 or 4 to 1 because there were other people there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what was the role of students?
Well, it was a really great experience to have that connection with community members, and the role of the students was really to help facilitate some of the conversation between community members to voice their concerns for some of the parks and express their vision for a lot of these parks.
And you're a graduate student?
Yes.
And so were there only graduate students doing this program, or were there other undergraduates helping as well from ESF?
There was undergraduates as well.
Okay. And so just a little bit about you. You're in what year at Syracuse?
In my 3rd year at
Okay.
ESF.
And what are you going to leave with?
A master's in landscape architecture.
And where are you originally from?
Long Island.
And I know Councilor Carbajal specifically asked you to move to the city of Auburn last Thursday night. But you're from, what are your plans? Do you graduate this coming year?
I graduate this year.
Okay, so what are your plans in the future?
My plans in the future are to continue this kind of community engagement work for sure
Okay.
in my professional career.
And I'm not asking you where, but you're going to
Yes.
stay in this field, is what I'm
Yes,
saying.
exactly.
So does that mean, do you join an architectural firm? Do you join an academic organization?
Well, my plans specifically are to join a landscape architecture firm, also sometimes combined with engineering firms or city planning. So that's what the plans are.
How many graduates do you graduate a year in this particular program?
Well, in undergraduate, we graduate about 30, and graduate is typically about 10 to 12.
So very small, relatively small.
It's relatively small. The undergraduate program is a 5-year program, and then the graduate program, first professional degree is a 3-year program.
So do you walk out with both an SU degree and an ESF degree, or just an ESF degree?
ESF.
Okay. So one of the parks specifically, and we got about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure we talk about Clifford Park.
Okay.
The old Y field has been in the news. The Monk Curtin Clubhouse has been discussed. What's going on? And so that's behind
Sure.
me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the city has decided to make an effort to work on Clifford Park. It is one of our larger regional parks in the city, and and we want to keep it that way. And it's been over 40 years since we've done a major park renovation project there.
So what are you proposing?
So right now we have 3 phases. So
Okay.
phase 1 is work on the Monk Curtain Clubhouse.
Okay.
That is actually underway. We finally received our grant contract from the state, so it's official. We can start work. So people might have seen our Department of Public Works out there power washing. We're going to be replacing the exterior, working on the windows, the interior, the bathrooms. So that we're hoping to have completed before softball season starts next spring,
Okay.
and have the bathrooms reopened, and it'll be really nice. So phase 2 is to work on updates to the playground equipment. There's concerns with safety there with the transition pieces. And there's not a young tots, a 2 to 5
Right.
appropriate, age
Jungle
appropriate.
gyms
That's
and
right.
things, okay.
So we want to look at that, as well as enhancing and updating the lighting system that's there for the fields. Those are 2 of the 4 that are mainly used for the summer softball field program, mostly the women's program,
Mm-hmm.
and they do go into the evening sometimes, so the lighting is needed to
And
continue
that's next
play.
year?
That'll be, we're hoping. It's also going to be state funded. So we have not officially released that yet. We're working on the budget, and then we'll bring that to City
And
Council.
the third and final phase would be
Third and
when?
final phase will be tennis courts and basketball court.
And what's the timeline for that? That's
That could be quicker depending upon the type of funding that's available for that.
and this is all financed by the state. You're not looking at local taxpayers.
So it's a mix:
Okay.
city dollars, state dollars, and potentially private foundation.
So in the many revisions of this report, there were all types of things being done, proposed for Clifford. One was modify the tennis courts, one was get rid of the softball field. I think you figured out you couldn't do that because of women's softball
We
alone. In the end, what are you proposing? What's being proposed? Is it to stay with the 2 fields and the tennis courts at this particular stage?
We are at the moment, so it's really going to be, refurbish of existing conditions. That's not to say in the future we'd like to look at that 1 ball field and potentially do turf or something there where it could be more of a multi-use field. There is demand for soccer programs, lacrosse, etc. So we're trying to meet those demands as we can.
So what, in the end, I have two last questions because I'm getting the wrap-up sign. So the first one is, what do you hope to accomplish? We mentioned that one of the counselors said they wanted this part of the strategic plan, a strategic planning session for the city council overall. What do you hope will be generated by this?
First and foremost, it's up for City Council adoption tomorrow night, this
Thursday
week,
night.
Thursday night for City Council. So once it's formally adopted as a city master plan, I'm hoping it will be integrated into their continued discussion for goals. And
So funding, because one of the things that was proposed was to have a staffer on board to help
That's correct.
coordinate.
Yep.
And at least one city councilor has mentioned that very positive. Do you think that's something that is likely?
we'll have to wait and see how the budget process progresses next spring.
So last thing, you, separate from all of this, is you run the Community Development Block Grant Program for the city. You have 2 public hearings which you encourage people to come to.
Yes, we have a public meeting on October 26th. That's a Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. It's at City Hall and Council Chambers. And we have a public hearing on Tuesday, November 1st at 6:30 p.m.
And that's a Tuesday night.
Correct.
It's a week before Election Day. So what are you, anybody can attend these, and will they be interacting? Will that be similar to these where you're asking them for input?
We will be asking them for input. Typically, we might do a brief presentation or at a minimum at least have projects that we've done for CDBG throughout the past year, slideshow, so people at least know what the funding can be used for. And then we try and do it more of an open house style and really try and have conversations with the citizens
And people
that
can go to
attend.
the city's website for information. The city will be doing publicity. on
Yes,
this.
and there's also a survey on the city's homepage, auburnny.gov, for CDBG.
We want to thank Tiffany Beebe, the senior planner for the city of Auburn, as well as Christina Selvik, who is the director of capital projects, as well as Maren King of SUNY's ESF Department of Architecture, and SUNY ESF graduate student Natalie Spinola. Good luck, by the way, in
Thank you.
graduation, to discuss Auburn's new master plan and where it goes from here for active and passive parks. We will return in just a moment with a new Beyond the Front Page show with the new Cuyahoga County Economic Development Agency and Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Tracy Verver, to discuss her new jobs and responsibilities, as well as the state of economic development in Cuyahoga County, as well as the Chamber's upcoming dinner with Chamber Manager Amy Fuller. This coming Thursday, we'll have a extended Inside Government with New York State Senator John DeFrancisco, who will be in the studio. And on Tuesday, Inside Government will feature Cuyahoga County Legislative Chairman Keith Batman for a county update. Later in the month, we will be hosting, as we normally do, a number of annual forums for the candidates running for the State Assembly and the Senate. We have confirmations for the candidates for the 51st Senate District, Senator James Seward and his challenger, Jermaine Bagnell Graham, for Thursday, October 20th, and the candidates for the 126th Assembly District, which faces off Assemblyman Gary D. Finch and his challenger, Diane Dwyer, on Tuesday, November 1st. That's why I knew it was a Tuesday. We also will bring you the candidates, hopefully, for the 54th Senate District to replace retiring Senator Michael F. Nizzolo. So far, we have a confirmation from Democratic candidate Kenan Baldridge, as well as the race for Congress between Congressman John Katko and Colleen Deacon. We would like to let you know that you can send us your ideas for shows or questions for guests that are not in the forums to Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page. You can contact us at cozguytho@aol.com or at Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night, have a great tomorrow, and stick around for Beyond the Front Page.